The Zenith Chronicles, Book 1, Pray for the Hunter, by Keelah Rose Calloway. Prologue. The Legacy of Lilith. There is a legend that stems from ancient beliefs, a myth of an entity whose divine origins have been profaned through the millennia that have passed since the first tales began. A celestial being succumbed to demonic defilement and was lost to a hellish fate. It is widely accepted that she began her existence in human form, but few can agree upon what she became once every trace of the divine hand had been wiped away. Is she a goddess, a demon, a woman, or a witch? There is a point where history, legend, and myth collide. There are tales of a woman called Lilith, of her birth, her life, and her legacy. These stories cross religions, span time, and change as often as people themselves do. There is but one group of people who know the truth. What follows is the true story of Lilith and her progeny. It is a truth that has been partially known by many, but accepted as fact by few. And it is a truth, like so many others, that is accepted only by those who use it as a foundation for their very lives. Lilith's children. On the sixth day of creation, the Lord of Light made man in his image, using dirt from the ground. And from dirt, or filth and sediment as some would tell it, he then created woman. He called his creations Adam and Lilith. They were given Eden, a garden paradise, as their home. Their only purpose was to create offspring like themselves. However, when the time came for Lilith to lie with Adam and bear his children, she would not do it. She asked him, "Why should I lie beneath you when I am your equal, since both of us were created from dust?" When she saw that Adam meant to overpower her despite her protests, Lilith refused to receive his seed. For her defiance, she was banished from the garden. There was no fanfare for Lilith's departure, no strident angels wielding flaming swords at the gate, no cursing words from God. And unlike her successor, Lilith was not foolish enough to leave empty-handed. She took with her fruit from both the tree of knowledge and from the tree of life. That, perhaps, is the reason these fruits were later declared forbidden. Cast now from Eden, Lilith found herself on a barren earth. She was drawn to the shores of the Red Sea, which was a haven for a horde of lascivious demons. Lilith might have had her pick of these, for any of them would have been willing to be dominated by her. She was instead drawn to the darkest of them all, the one living soul who knew what it was to lose paradise, Lucifer. In Lucifer's arms, Lilith found solace. The two were wed by the blind dragon Taniniver in an infamous ceremony that lasted for weeks. When the Lord of Light received word of their union, he became enraged. He could not allow their marriage to prosper because they threatened to fill the world with their demonic brood, and so he castrated Lucifer, thus preventing him from fathering any offspring from Lilith's womb. He was too late. At the time of the marriage, Lilith's body had already accepted Lucifer's seed, and on the fourth equinox following her conception, the first of 4 children emerged from her womb. On the winter solstice of the following year, the final child emerged at last, and her daughters lived and breathed as one. Lucifer's wrath at the treatment he suffered at the hand of his creator, festering with maleficent venom since the day he left God's kingdom, now erupted in the face of this insufferable indignity. He became twisted by hatred and fury, and bent on causing mankind to suffer as he himself had done. Lilith could only watch as he lured Eve from the garden and brought about a permanent curse on her descendants. She tried her best to shield her own daughters from the poisonous rage their father spread, before it could warp them as it had warped him. For he was no longer her Lucifer, full of dark light. He had become something more hideous than she could ever have imagined. She was perhaps the first to discover that protecting her children from their other parent is far easier said than done. And so the young eyes of Lilith's daughters were aged by knowledge no child should have, but not touched by God's smiling blessing, as human children were. For these beings, despite their form, were not fully human. They were something else. Lilith could see the darkness in their eyes every time she looked into their faces. She soon realized that her only hope for her daughters to lead a blessed life and to have the chance to regain paradise for themselves was to get them away from their father as quickly as possible. And so she took them back into the barren earth, as far from the dangerous waters of the Red Sea as she could get them. She did her best to teach her daughters all that she knew. She realized that her daughters were perfect. They had the long life and almost infinite knowledge of their mother, and the dark, almost incomprehensible powers of their father. She educated them in the ways of the Lord, but Lucifer's gifts to them proved to be far more influential, and one by one her daughters were seduced by forces that even she could barely understand. One by one, Lilith's daughters left her side. There was never a single instance, as long as they all lived, in which all four were again together. As the world filled with descendants of Eve's seed, they grew further and farther apart. Then, when the great floods came and so many of Eve's children were destroyed, Lilith gave her own daughters up for lost. Her only escape from the waters was in Lucifer's lair, and she dared not return to that God-forsaken place. What she wanted more than anything was to return to the Lord's garden and spend the rest of her days at his side, but that was never to be. Nothing more was heard of Lilith after the floods except in folklore. It was said that she preyed upon human children as vengeance for her own lost brood, and for years Eve's progeny practiced rituals designed to ward her off and protect their young. At last, even these harmless fables were eventually forgotten, and she now remains only in name, invoked for feminist causes and subversive practices. The truth about her is obscured by the legends and the lies, except to those who know better. For Lilith's perfect daughters did survive the floods, and they lived interminable lives, filled with progeny of their own. Their daughters had daughters, and more daughters followed, all bearing the same blood Lilith once carried, and all marked by the same stigma of Lucifer. There are those who will swear to it that Lilith never was. Some may admit to her existence, but refuse to believe that she bore children. There is even dissent among those who concede this point. Some vow that she birthed more than four. Some say that all she had were daughters, while others insist that she left behind a son. The names of Lilith's children vary from place to place. They have been called Lilin, sorceresses, enchantresses, hags, Lilitu, crones, prophets, magicians, diviners, psychics, goddesses, Lilu, seductresses, shrews, warlocks, Irdulili, hexes, lamias, beldams, sirens, night demons, storm demons, and all the names for evil that exist in this world. Yet no matter where you go or who you ask, there is one answer that will remain unanimous, one label that will never change. There is one thing that all of Lilith's children indisputably are: witches. I am a witch, a real one. Do not hold me to the seedling standard of the word. I do not mean that I fit the vernacular term for a rude or aggressive female, and I do not mean that I wear pointed hats and travel by broomstick. Last Halloween, I went to see a foreign film, not wanting pesky children pestering me for sweet things to stuff their silly faces with. I am not fond of children, be they seedling or otherwise. I do not like to kidnap and eat them, although I have tasted of their bones before. I must say I was not impressed. I prefer steak. The bloodier, the better. Immodestly, I can inform you that I am very attractive, bewitching, if you prefer. The long, wart-encrusted noses generally associated with my kind are not to be found upon my visage. Although I was born in 1909, I am by no means old and decrepit. By our standards, I am quite young indeed. It is roughly the equivalent of late teens or early 20s for seedlings, those who were born of Eve's seed. Although my powers allow me to assume any age or race that I choose, I usually favor retaining my birth form, for I am a descendant of Lilith's southern spawn, a child of summer solstice, a child of constant day. When passing for a seedling, I am easily associated with a racial subgroup referred to as black. Long ago, I cast a spell on my eyes to make their color change in accordance with my mood. The colors, of course, are not limited to those of seedlings, and the hues they sometimes assume are captivating to behold. I am tall, even by our standards, and remain slender in spite of my diet. You may be disappointed to learn that I possess no preternatural ability to communicate with animals or to tell the future, and not a single crystal ball. I do not even own a cat. My constant companion is my familiar, a white raven called Slore. We can communicate perfectly, because he is as far from being a mere animal as I am from a mere seedling. A familiar spirit is a spirit that has been voluntarily encased within an animal's empty body. All daughters of Lilith keep them to cast spells because they allow us to store and channel our powers so that we don't risk exhausting or draining ourselves with every new spell. I have killed. I don't find it at all disturbing, nor should you. They were seedlings, of course, not sisters of mine. We are not all killers, if only because the unnatural fixation seedlings have regarding the morality of taking a life. They have yet to accept that death is a natural consequence of life, and so killing a seedling typically causes more problems than it solves. Since any action that may bring unwanted attention to the coven is frowned upon, the slaughter of seedlings is not encouraged. Ours is not a position to which any may aspire. We are born with our gifts, yet the gifts alone are not enough. If left untrained, we are incomplete and thereafter doomed to be lost within the seedling race, different but never quite knowing how or why. It is up to those of us who have already completed their journey into becoming fully known in our ways to reach back and edify the rest of us, passing down customs and traditions that have defined our existence for millennia. Each of us has had this figure, our Edifiant. With her, we become not simply trained, but indoctrinated, enlightened, and uplifted onto the higher plane that is our birthright. Without an edifiant to show our way, our gifts can become suppressed from lack of proper use. With each passing year, that which makes us different fades a little more, and we blend more completely into the seedling race. Barring this unnatural suppression, our difference is a visible one, allowing us to easily pick one another out of any crowd of common seedlings. Our auras emit pulses of energy that cannot be duplicated. Our power grows as we become more complete and as we age. The older the individual, the stronger the power, the more prevalent the pulses of energy. I was born in Zaire, in a small village. When the settlement was attacked, my parents were killed. I remember little of this, and no one lived to tell the tale of how or why my mother's life was taken. My earliest real memory is of the British family that adopted me and took me with them to Europe, where I was kept, partly as a servant, but primarily as a novelty. At the age of 7 summers, a visitor to their home recognized the powers within me and spirited me away from my adopted family. I came to know her as Hyantia, and she became my Edifiant. She took it upon herself to tell me what I was and helped me complete my journey. Through spells that she taught me, I learned that my mother's chosen mate was the son of a powerful shaman. Thus, although he was a seedling, the spirit world was strong with him, and few of the gifts have been lost. She told me I had the capacity for great power if I remained by her side indefinitely and learned all that she knew. I knew that Hyantia spoke the truth, but I craved my own path. So once I became complete, I relocated to the States along with Slore, and I have been here ever since. It has been decades since I was in Great Britain, and never again did I go to Africa. We live long, and I do not know where we go when we die. It is believed that Mother Lilith herself appears in the final moments to guide the passing soul into the next realm. Hyantia told me that those who conduct themselves most in Lilith's image are rewarded with entry into Lucifer's domain, while the others must wander the earth for an eternity. According to her, none of us will ever be permitted to set foot in God's kingdom. Like seedlings, we often have different beliefs, but our belief in God is nearly universal, even if the name we call him varies. After all, without him there would have been no Lucifer, no Lilith, and no us. Yet we are also compelled to give thanks to Lucifer, from whose seed our ancestors sprang. Whether or not we worship one, both, or neither is purely a matter of choice. I choose to give my praises to God alone, for He is the creator of all things. I could never consider an eternity spent in hell to be a reward of any kind. I acknowledge that our origins may deem us unworthy of God's love, grace, or even His mercy, but we are considered damned because Lucifer is forever damned. I know this, but I cannot stop myself remembering that the world's ultimate good and the world's ultimate evil sprang forth from the same Creator's hands. And so I worship that Creator in the hopes that one day His hand will also touch me. I want one day to bask in the glory of God. That is why I offer Him my prayers and occasionally my thanksgiving. I realize that my efforts are likely in vain. I just seem to have always had something inside me that longed for the comfort of knowing that I could receive salvation if only I asked for it. In spite of that, I may well end up suffering eternally with Lucifer. Perhaps we all will. One day I will have to find this out for myself, for there is no one to tell me. We, like seedlings, cannot return once dead. That, apparently, is a privilege reserved for the Messiah alone. There was a time when I went hand in hand with seedlings to their earthly places of worship, where dozens of them at a time swore they could feel the rapture of the Lord flowing through their fragile bodies, giving them strength and hope and indescribable joy. I watched them with longing in my heart for the same experience, and it still saddens me to know that it has never come to me. I don't go to churches anymore. I have spent far too many years bearing witness to the hypocrisy of seedlings to believe their hollow words of praise, so I have no religious affiliations. I believe in no seedling prophets, and I read no seedling scriptures. Mohammed, the saints, and Jesus Christ are of no importance to me. I neither believe nor do I disbelieve in their existence. Since I am not part of mankind, their lives, if lived at all, have naught to do with mine. Nevertheless, my faith remains. I still speak to God when the need fills my heart, and I still harbor the hope that He is listening. To the unknowing seedling, I call myself a witch. It is their word, and it is accurate in its limited way. The word's major shortcoming is its implication that the person identified is a typical human who just happens to practice magic. If nothing else, it must be understood that we are not human. We are something more, something greater. There are hundreds of words and dozens of languages for our kind, but amongst ourselves there is a term we prefer to use to set ourselves apart from the inbred descendants of Eve. We are heirs, heirs to the mighty power wielded by our forebears, heirs to the damnation of a woman scorned by God, yet loved by His enemy. We are the ones who will always bear the weight of her betrayal, as long as we walk the earth. And in the afterlife, we, perhaps, are the ones who will pay. To call us witches is really rather insulting once you know the truth. And as for referring to us as Wiccans or any of those seedling nutters who light black candles and fancy themselves practitioners of the so-called dark arts, well, I wouldn't recommend it. It is a grave insult, because to refer to us in any way which denies our inimitable heritage is to reject thousands of years spent honoring the memory of our mother Lilith and her sacrifice. It casually dismisses thousands of years of, until recently, survival. Perhaps in retrospect, I am not truly a witch anyway. Not in the seedling sense of the word. No matter. I prefer the word enchantress, anyhow. I am presently seated on my sofa in my apartment in San Francisco. I am aimlessly changing the channels on my television set. Such a seedling-like activity is not among my usual habits, and the irony of finally using this silly technology, which I purchased on a whim, and not even paying attention to it, is not lost on me, but it is far from the focus of my thoughts. Tonight I am on edge, suffering from what could be called insomnia. I have always harbored a predilection for the enveloping shrouds of the night, in spite of the fact that my powers are at their most fecund point during the brightest parts of the day. The truth is that the cool purity of the moon and its surrounding blackened skies soothes the darkness I so often feel within, while the sun often aggravates my senses with its relentless heat. Tonight, however, for the first time that I can remember, I would rather sleep and veil the crisis of these past months beneath a cloak of unconsciousness. yet I cannot. I admit that irony has never been one of my favorite concepts. For 6 months now, Lilith's heirs have been dying. The first instances occurred naturally. Older heirs had gone to Mother Lilith in the typical way, with all the proper signs in place prior to her coming. These reports were not alarming, for all that they were closer in appearance than was usual. Stranger things had previously occurred and meant nothing. So my coven made offerings in their names and moved on. Then different news began to trickle in, gradually assuming the insidious regularity of a red tide. Accounts of death and mutilation reached us here from as far away as Prague. This was especially puzzling, because we can live for hundreds of years. It is very difficult to kill a daughter of Lilith, even for others of our kind, because we all guard ourselves with regularly renewed protective spells. Only Lilith has immortality. She is all powerful and will continue to exist when God takes the world away, although she is neither humble nor meek. Yes, she is forever, but the rest of us have to depend upon rejuvenation spells. Those of us who value our lives constantly renew the spells that allow our bodies to heal almost any wound quickly. Our bodies can withstand more damage than humans. Our systems are immune to AIDS, cancers, and other pesky diseases that help curb the seedling population. In fact, a militant coven in Cincinnati claimed to have started the spread of the AIDS virus as a way of systemically eliminating seedlings. And yet, according to an account from Naples, an entire coven perished from a mysterious infection in 1 week's time. An infection! As if those tidings were not sinister enough, the damage reports keep pouring in. A fire in Bristol that raged for days, killing 200, only half of whom were seedlings. The collapse of a building during a coven meeting, which included every heir in South Africa. The complete disappearance of all 17 members of a tiny coven in Nepal. So far, the U.S. covens have not been attacked en masse. This has not gone unnoticed by the rest of our world, and they are fleeing their own homelands in panic, seeking the shelter of our shores. They aren't making it. A series of mysterious and devastating plane crashes has seedlings in an uproar. They are desperately seeking a link, expecting terrorists to begin making demands at any moment. Myriad seedling terrorist organizations have taken advantage of the opportunity to do just that, which is causing political strife all over the globe. Of course, none of the seedlings have grasped the one true connection. A significant percentage of the victims have been Lilith's heirs. Those attempting to make the passage on boats have been no better off. Ships in every ocean have been sinking to the depths as though Lucifer himself was calling them down with an infernally bright torch from some impious nether lighthouse. Only the oldest, strongest heirs with the power to transport themselves over such large bodies of water have been successful. The others are doomed to die making the journey in less reliable ways. It would seem, then, that we are just as upset by a natural death as seedlings are. There is nothing natural about genocide. An epidemic of alarm is sweeping our world, and for the first time in our lives, many of us are experiencing fear. Fear. It is a word I never imagined I would use to describe my own emotions. Here I sit, projecting an outward sense of calm as I aimlessly allow the media's insipid imagery to invade my home and my mind. Within, I am a quivering mass of nerves, each synapse responding even to the flow of blood as it pulses through my veins. I am sickened as much by the helplessness of this feeling as I am by the events themselves. My only way of even knowing what it is that is wreaking havoc with my mind, causing me to jump at the slightest shift of a shadow on the wall, is vague memories of my early childhood. Scents of gunpowder, echoes of dying screams, the heat of the fire as it returned our huts to the ground. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I was only 5 years old when I lost my world, but there are times when the moon disappears and the night is as dark as the memories I have of my parents, when I can almost displace my conscious mind and return there. This is what I was forced to do to make my familiar. This is what I was forced to do to identify my own pathetic fear. Once the sun reveals its light, a few hours hence, I must be in complete readiness for an urgent gathering. Only this afternoon, as I was preparing an additional protective spell, did the summons come. And it came from Galia, the coven leader herself. Typically, Cassiopeia, an entirely too cheerful individual, will send round a reminder to each of us. This has long been a sore point with my good friend Azrael and me, who are of the opinion that coven meetings are not something one is likely to forget. Especially annoying is Cass's desire to make her reminders as creative as possible. Last quarter it was a small tree, which I woke to find growing from the drain in my bathtub. Each leaf had one word of the information I needed to attend the meeting, and I had to spend nearly 15 minutes arranging them in the proper order. Keelah is more traditional, and thankfully, she contacted me in the usual way, over water. When my receiving vessel began vibrating in an unfamiliar pattern, I knew it was a missive of import. As always, she was calm when she spoke. Yet our coven typically convenes only at the waxing moon, and Galia's willingness to break this rigid tradition was, in my mind, cause for alarm. The fact that she herself did the grunt work only added to my suspicions that something was very wrong, even worse than anything I had yet imagined. It is said that not even the death of the last perfect made Galia reset her schedule, and if the stoic, dogmatic, and utterly remorseless female I have come to know is any indication, I have no doubt of this. Her impassive words belied no undercurrents or hidden emotions. Nonetheless, her message was ominous. Clearly, she knew more than she told. The unknown is not something I devote a great deal of time to contemplating. I am no philosopher. I live my life with little thought to anything further than the immediate future. Though my age would seem ancient to a descendant of Eve, I am often treated by my sisters as an adolescent. Galia, especially rigid in her outlook on everything from spell work to appropriate conduct, has little tolerance for the fly-by-night attitude with which I approach my life. Azrael and I have spent many a day bemoaning the iron fist with which she rules the coven. I wonder suddenly how much longer I will have to moan. So absorbed am I in my morose thoughts, I nearly pass by the next channel, a 24-hour local news station. The brief glance I get of policemen and a taped off crime scene does not faze me in the least. Living in a metropolis accustoms one to violence, and I especially am not bothered by it. Were I to turn myself in, several of the unsolved crimes on record here would be removed. Just as I am about to change the channel once more, something about the house I caught a brief glimpse of jogs my memory. When I turn back, it is all too clear why. The house has a door painted cobalt blue. In its lower right-hand corner is painted a symbol I know well. How many times have I passed through that door and into the realms beyond it, so much more expansive than one would have anticipated from a tiny townhouse in a crowded city? How many times have I felt the power of that mark pass through me as I entered and exited? The sensation is not something I am likely to ever forget, because I have that same mark in the same place upon my own front door. My heart speed increases as I listen to the report. The victim did share her home with a boyfriend, according to her neighbors, the anchor is saying. It is not yet clear whether he is a suspect in this case, but the police are tracking him down for questioning. They flash a photo of the man in question across the screen and an 800 number beneath it. If you have any information that could lead to the whereabouts of this individual, he continues, please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-92-CRIME. The camera goes back to the newsroom desk where the co-anchor, a petite brunette, is visibly shuddering. 30 pieces, she exclaims. Somebody must have wanted to make sure she was dead. Let's hope it's not the beginning of a serial crime spree, the man replies, nodding to his colleague. Giving his attention to the camera, he adds, keep out of dark alleys. The cheer these two exude while discussing the gruesome details of a stranger's murder is almost surreal. They chatter on for a bit longer about the evils of the world, but I am no longer listening. The person whose death has become the subject of their blithe and boorish banter is one of my sisters, Sikora. Sikora? Dead? How could that be? She was not a member of my coven, but I knew her well. She scorned the very idea of organizing our lives along what she considered to be the same soulless bureaucratic lines entrapping the seedlings. Our own version of a beloved neighborhood eccentric, she was a lithe, athletic heir who moved with the grace of the gazelle and the swiftness of the tiger. She was lethal. How could anyone have gotten the best of her? So it begins. I whisper. The U.S. is no longer safe from this extermination. I wonder how long the rest of us have before we, too, will meet Sikora's fate. My eyes are drawn back to the ghoulishly cheerful faces on the screen, and I remember the anchor's words. Somebody must have wanted to make sure she was dead. I shut off the television abruptly and stand up, sending skyward a brief prayer that my legs will be able to hold me. I have no doubt that the others in my coven will know of this. We all receive signs when one of our own dies. Even now, in my casting chamber, my lotus blossoms will be wilting, and the holy water I keep in my sacred urn will have come to a boil. Lately, that is all it ever does. There are only a few hours until the scheduled start of the meeting. Surely Keelah will recognize the emergency and address it. How could she not when the side scrim blade has fallen so close? I arise from my place on my sofa and retreat into the depths of my dwelling. The room I enter appears at first to be a library. Although I get few visitors, I am prepared for the unexpected, and the room's appearance changes each time I pass through the door and recite my incantation. As I enter this night, the walls shift and seem to blend away as the illusion disappears and the true nature of the space materializes. Slore ejaculates a greeting upon seeing me. He is settled on a wooden perch just above the stand that holds my open spell book. In that book are the complex spells I have collected for over 70 years. I really should have more of them committed to memory, but it just takes so much time. I reply to Slore by creating a low noise in my throat that sounds something like a chuckle crossed with a sigh. These are our signals worked out after years together. Slore knows what I want to do, and he is disdainful. I myself wonder why I am bothering. Through the tumult of these past months, I have tried in all the ways I know to contact Azrael, but my attempts have been in vain. Slore does not think that tonight's attempt will end any differently. She's been raising Keelah's ire by skipping coven meetings and hasn't answered anyone's summons, including my own. I cannot fathom how she has been dealing with the constant stress of so many deaths on her own. I hope she will not ignore me this night. There is a need within my body for contact with someone I am close to, and Azrael is the greatest friend I have ever known. Resigned to my stubbornness, Slore readies himself for a commonplace spell, one that requires only him, a handful of myrtaceae leaves, and a smooth liquid surface. Water works best so long as it has a small surface area and is not running, but any liquid of similar density will do in a pinch, provided the incantation is modified accordingly. Slore flies to another perch near a vessel of water, kept in a tall vase made of pure obsidian, a gift from an old admirer. I run my fingers down his spine and dip them into the water, reciting the customary verse as I wait for the surface to still itself. Calling, calling through time and space, reach through the skies to a distant place, gather forth the winds of Maunder, prepare the message from the cinder. Incantations are tricky things. A practiced heir creates her own spells for more specific purposes, and for these, original incantations must be used. The one I used to contact my sisters was taught to me by Hintia. After reciting the verse, I spread the leaves into the water in the necessary pattern and wait for them to disintegrate. The crux of the spell lies in the pattern of the leaves. If even one is misplaced, the water must be poured out and the entire process repeated. It is a tedious affair indeed, and a phone call would be much more efficient. But it is necessary that I convey urgency, and necessary that seedling ears not overhear the communication. After a time, the pool of liquid begins to pulse. Slore squawks, as he always does when I am contacting one of my coven mates in this way. It is basically a form of telepathy, for which the water is a conduit. The sounds of our voices do not travel through the water. I quiet Slore with my eyes as I wait anxiously for many long moments, hoping against hope that she will finally answer. I wish, not for the first time, that we were bound. Then I would always know where she is, always be able to sense her, always be irrevocably connected to her. Such a fate would be ideal, and highly preferable to these months of wondering where she has been. When Azrael's face does at last appear in the vase, I release a sigh of relief that I wasn't even aware I was withholding. It is so good to see her. Though she looks disheveled and out of breath, her face alone offers me comfort and relief. This is something I would never admit aloud, for I must be careful with my Azrael. She dislikes any show of emotion. Striving to keep my face as stoic as she keeps her own, I greet her with busy. I am pleased with the sarcastic tone I am able to adopt, as if it hasn't been 6 long months since I last looked upon her face, heard her voice, or had any contact with her at all. I breathe deeply, vowing that I will not mention her lengthy absence unless she does. Above all, I must not drive her away again with my own longing. Aren't I always? She replies. What is it, Zenith? Why aren't you out hunting? It is an old joke, one I am not in the mood to hear. Once Azrael and I roamed the streets after dark, scaring helpless humans out of their wits simply because we could. It has been quite some time since our last foray. It would seem that the outings are as much a part of the past as Socorro's life. I have been in, I reply, watching the news. The news? Azrael's voice is incredulous, contemptuous. Why would you want to waste time with seedling affairs? I pause for yet another deep breath. I am thinking of Azrael's words. Was it seedling affairs that ended Socorro's existence so abruptly? Azrael detects my mood and her tone is softer when she speaks again. Zenith, what is it? Socorro is dead. My voice betrays my inner turmoil. She was found 2 hours ago. Azrael is silent for a long moment. When her voice sounds again, it is thick with myriad emotions. Has it come so soon? She whispers. It is more of a moan than a question. Yes, Azrael, I confirm. Whatever is happening to us is now happening here. How did she do it? How was Socorro killed? She was chopped into pieces, I answer, feeling queasy. I recognize the feeling only from my readings of the seedling psyche. It is not a pathos Lilith's heirs normally have to deal with. 30 pieces. Again, silence. Have you spoken with Keelah? No, I expect that she'll know of this. She must know of this. Surely she will speak of it once we are together. Azrael sighs deeply. Zenith, Her voice catches oddly, as if she is attempting to hold back an onslaught of tears. I want you to know that I have always loved you. My brow furrows. It has been so long since I have seen Azrael, my closest companion. I remember how oddly she behaved the last time we met, to raid the night and fill the chilled air with seedling screams. Odd even for Azrael. And though it warms me to hear those words from her lips, I continue to harbor worry for her stability, especially in light of this recent tragedy. After all, the last time she told me that, she disappeared for 6 months. Ray, I won't have you acting as if the very world were about to end, however likely it may seem now. Hold yourself together somehow until answers can be found. I pause, watching her carefully. Her eyes, the color of unpolluted water, so blue they seem at first glance to be clear, keep darting to one side. Her hair is uncharacteristically unkempt, and she is pulling at a lock of it quite incessantly. It is apparent to me that I do not have her complete attention. Do you want me to come over there? Her eyes jump back immediately to me and harden into ice. No, I open my mouth to protest her hasty answer, but she plows on, not allowing me the chance to speak. I thank you, Zenith, for letting me know, she continues, her tone mechanical. I fear I'll require some time to myself. Do you mind? I would prefer to be at her side, but Azrael has always been fiercely independent and heals well on her own. I just have to hope she'll recover quickly and be able to aid us in this crisis. Of course not, I return gently. I'll see you at the meeting. I'm about to step away from the vessel, then quickly look back into it with a frown. You are coming, aren't you? You haven't been in so long, and Galia will have your head if you miss another gathering, especially now. So much for my vow. Oh yes, Azrael's voice is strangely hollow. I will be there. The water stills and her image disappears. Slor squawks again, and I answer in my way, calming him. I am sure that Socorro's fate is not catching. I am sure that whoever killed her will not be stupid enough to try it again this night. My words belie my true feelings, and Slor regards me skeptically, recognizing my discomfort. So consumed are my thoughts by Sikora's death and the obvious chinks in Azrael's typically unflappable demeanor that I merely stand for a time, lost on the winding highways of my own thought. For several long moments I stare into the murky waters of my vase before realizing, with a pang of guilt, that it has been quite some time since I replaced the water. After many leaves have been disintegrated in the vessel, the image becomes more and more cloudy, and it takes longer for the desired party to be reached. That could be part of the reason why it took so long to get a hold of Azrael. I take up the heavy vase in both hands and pour the water down the drain, rinsing it well and then refilling it with purified water rather than tap. The particles that the city officials leave in their water interfere with the transmission. Just as I am setting the vase back on its stand, it begins to throb in my hands. I quickly replace it beneath Slur's perch and quiet his chirping, running my fingers through his feathers and dipping them into the vase to accept the summons. As the surface image clarifies, I see Galia herself at the other end, staring at me with her frosty gray eyes. Hello, Zenith. Her voice is even and perfunctory, as usual, revealing no trace of her emotions. You've heard of Sikora's unfortunate demise. It is a statement, not a question. Whether she knows how to pick up on other conversations or is a mind reader, I do not know, but she is always abreast of things in our world. I nod in response, and she continues. The gathering has been altered slightly in light of this. Others will join us, including our non-member sisters. For purposes of space, the coven will now gather in 5 hours at the downtown Radisson. It will be a meeting of the San Francisco Right to Life League, 7:15 sharp. Again, I nod. There is a pause as Galia and I regard each other. She is a descendant of Lilith's pale child, the child of winter solstice, the child of night. She is at least 4 centuries in age, and she chooses to project the appearance of a woman in her mid to late 40s. I have rarely seen her smile, and she usually seems severe. However, her face now softens as she abruptly asks, How are you holding up? I am surprised as much by the sincerity in her voice as I am by the question itself. I have never known Galia to inquire after my well-being before. Shock loosens my tongue, and I give her an honest answer. I am unwell, I reply, swallowing heavily. I am experiencing the seedling condition known as nausea. After a beat, Galia sighs. Sikora was so good, she murmurs, so young. Just turned 126, if I'm not mistaken. Gilead, my voice breaks, much as Azrael's did. How could something like this happen? She shakes her head. I do not know. We will discuss that at the gathering. I must go, Zenith. There are others I must contact. You spoke with Azrael. Perhaps you can reach her again. I believe she may have emptied her vessel. Is it safe to use the phone? Simply inform her of the meeting and it should be all right, she replies. Again, we will be the San Francisco Right to Life League. The water stills without so much as a goodbye, but I am not offended. We do not feel the need for seedling formalities. In no mood now for dull and routine chores, I exit the room without refilling the vase and take Slor with me for company. At the moment, I do not feel like being alone. The chamber shifts behind me, silently becoming a library once more. The apartment is dark, but I am familiar enough with the layout of the place to avoid bothering with illumination. I dial Azrael's phone number, but receive only a shrill series of beeps that indicate a busy signal. She has no doubt taken her phone off the hook, and if I were betting on it, I'd wager that she's left the dwelling entirely. Perchance she is hunting again. As I replace the phone on its base, I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I switch on a table lamp so that I can clearly see the color of my eyes. They are swirling as I have rarely seen them, greens and blues combined with darker hues of violet, russet, and maroon. My emotions are in turmoil, and only my pupils remain the same, blacker than the midnight heavens. Slor chastises me for my vanity, and I reply with a lengthy series of hums and growls, singing to him, soothing him. Gradually his eyes close as he settles into the lull of sleep. I am not so lucky. Restless, disturbed, ready to see the others and find out what they think of this occurrence, I abruptly go to my hall closet where I keep my walking cloak. It is black, ankle length, hooded. Simply by wrapping it around my body, I am rendered invisible to the seedling eye. I especially like it because its spell never has to be renewed. It was my initiation gift. All heirs, having completed the necessary edification and creation of a familiar, are subsequently initiated into the coven of their choice, provided the leader accepts their request. After acceptance, a formal ceremony is held to welcome the heir into her new home amongst her sisters. The leader presents each newcomer with a gift, and the cloak was mine. It was given to me by Shenandoah, who led the coven before Galia. I am now garbed in my cloak over a skin-tight hunter's green dress that falls to mid-thigh, leaving most of my long legs exposed. The cool night air does not bother me, and I am unafraid of would-be rapists and assailants. Despite all my years of living amongst Orientals here in San Francisco, with plenty of time to spare, I lack any formal martial arts training. But I have my own defenses, and until recently, the very concept of fear was alien to me. On my feet are knee-length black boots with 4-inch spiked heels, and I wear a studded choker around my neck. My hair is braided and twisted into multiple knots atop my head. Through each of the numerous holes in my ears, I have driven a 1.5-inch nail. I am ready to face the night. Chapter 2. The San Francisco streets are quiet and nearly void of life. I have walked at night many times before, but never have I seen my home so deserted. It is as if the wind, which whips past me, sending my cloak flying, has whispered a warning into the ears of each and every seedling. Do not tarry from your homes this night. There are evil deeds afoot. There is evil afoot. I feel it in every cell of my body. Whatever killed Socorro is not yet gone from this place. It occurs to me that walking out alone, even protected as I am with magic and sheer force of will, is not the smartest move I could have made. Certainly none of those things kept Socorro alive. These truths must be acknowledged, but they do not deter me, not tonight. Tonight I must be outdoors to keep from going mad. I must feel the darkness in my bones before I can fully accept the fact that it has invaded my life. Beyond the quiet of the autumn night, I hear the steady sound of footsteps behind me. They are unhurried, but they do not shuffle, as with the steps of a drunk or vagrant. They do not stroll, they follow. They follow me. I do not bother to quicken my pace, though I wonder who or what it could be. Certainly not a seedling. My cloak is in perfect working condition. My hearing is excellent, and I am prepared for nearly anything. If this is who killed Socorro, they will find that I'll not go down without a fight. I continue instead at my current rate, trotting along like a female with no worries in the world other than the pressing thought of wanting to arrive quickly at my given destination. My pace carries me past closed storefronts and empty parking lots, but the stranger behind me keeps up, unmindful of the surroundings. Soon I spot something that intrigues me, a dark alley. It's the ideal B-movie spot for some after-midnight mischief. Smiling to myself, I duck inside. I can tell that the stranger is surprised by my sudden turn, and he or she or it nearly misses me. The footsteps hesitate before following me in, but the pause is just long enough to allow me to leap onto the roof via the fire escape. I accomplish this easily in just a few long strides, because I am well-toned and athletic. Of course, the fact that I am a direct descendant of the mighty Lilith helps a little too. Peering downwards, I try to spot my shadow, who by this time must have entered the alley as well. To my slight surprise and definite annoyance, it is nowhere to be seen. I am turning to go in the other direction, my only consolation the hope that I can disorient the stalker by making it think I have disappeared completely, when I am attacked from behind and pushed off the roof. I am startled, yes, but not so startled that I cannot manage to land upright, in a maneuver that would have shattered every bone in any seedling's feet. However, there is no time to congratulate myself. My assailant has also leapt from its spot above, and lands approximately 10 feet away with far more grace than I. It faces me, then moves with more speed than I would have thought possible. My attacker is male, of this I am now certain. I have time only to squeeze out this one realization before I must hastily dodge what could very well have been a fatal blow. In the same fluid motion, I leap and pivot, lashing out with my right foot. It was a move he anticipated, and my foot connects with the cement wall. Not a pleasant sensation, even for someone with as high a threshold of pain as my own. My feet are in poor condition now. I wonder if I can force myself to remember a swift transportation spell and curse myself for not bringing Slore and for not studying. The only spells I can remember that would actually be of some assistance require a familiar. I whistle low in my throat, making a series of sounds that would be odd to anyone unacquainted with them, but to the keen ears of my raven they are a call for help, an SOS, if you will. My attacker has given me a moment to breathe, a favor I'll not likely thank him for later. He is impressed with my ability, although it is obviously far less than his own. Perhaps he is measuring my stamina. I consider running. Usually I am very fast, certainly a match for seedling Olympians any day of the week. However, my feet are not at top notch. It will take several more minutes for the 20 or so bones located in each to mend the dozens of tiny fractures I have no doubt caused. I am not fool enough to believe that this unknown entity will allow me to live that long. I make a mental note to renew my self-healing spells. You are not human, I muse aloud. Am I hoping for confirmation? I cannot know. I am certain only of one thing. This creature intends to kill me. Its aura pulses with murderous intent, and even in the dark, I can make it out. He has no need to confirm his lack of humanity to me. I simply need more time. My mind whirls with a tempest of questions that flee through it, much as I would like to flee from this place. What is he? Is it true that there are male heirs? If so, why have I not encountered one before this night? No, he can't be. That much is clear from his aura. There is dissent among the covens as to whether or not male heirs even truly exist. The records of Lilith's life are ambiguous and vague and open to all forms of interpretation, much like the seedling Bible. Some swear she had a son. Others say all her sons were the vampires who spawned the thing I saw before me. So, if not, what else could he be? Not a seedling, no way in heaven or hell. No seedling could bring me to my knees. Even he hasn't. Not yet. Not this night. My feet are repairing themselves much faster than I anticipated, and if I can just stall for just a tiny bit more time, I may live to see the light of day. I wonder, in that instant, what Sikora's dying thought was. My, but you're quick. He has a voice like none I have heard before. It resonates power and the span of eons of time. He is very old, this one. I wish I could see his eyes. What are you? I whisper. Distantly, I hear the flap of wings. Slore. I can see the shadow cock his head. Merely a creature of the night, like yourself, he replies solemnly. This one has a real gift with words. He is frowning. I can tell when he next speaks. You don't seem afraid. Why is that? He is puzzled, and I am almost completely healed. Have I reason to fear you? I demand softly. Slore is on the roof now. I whistle again, softly croaking and chuckling to make him stay where he is, so as not to alert this thing to his presence until necessary. The figure shakes his head. Perhaps not. It is not my wish to kill you. I and those who have sent me merely want you to answer some questions. I do not wish to kill you, he repeats, but I will if I must. What are these questions? I request, chuckling again. Slur moves slowly down the fire escape, biding his time and mine. My feet are fully healed now, but I do not move. It is my wish to convey the impression that I am severely injured. I have been following you for quite some time now, Zenith, he replies. I am jolted by the sound of my name upon his tongue. He must be lying. Impossible that I should have been tailed by anyone or anything and not be aware of it. I have cast spells designed specifically with such a possibility in mind. I can almost hear his smirk. The darkness is too complete for me to clearly make out his facial expression. Do you think yourself above such routine affairs? He sounds as if he pities my ignorance. Your spells were not designed for one such as myself. My knees are weak with surprise. Can this thing read minds as well? What are you? I repeat, my mouth dry as the desert sands. I am someone in search of the truth, he says, his voice betraying the latent power of his ears. I want to know what happened to your friend Sakura. Sakura was murdered, I reply shortly. How much can he truly know? By whom? I snort disdainfully. If I knew that, I would be hunting them instead of you. He laughs and my ire increases. Is that what you were doing while you ran from me? Hunting? Is that what you predators do? I draw in a deep breath. It is entirely possible that he is the one who killed Sakura. I have no way of knowing, have I? What makes you think I am in a position to know any more about Sakura's death than you do? I demand. I was under the impression that you had all kinds of spells, including the kind that answer the unanswerable questions. I can feel the last bone fragments in my feet fall into place. Before I speak, I whistle. What do you think I am? There's that smile in his voice again. Is this a quiz? I think the only one here in a position to ask questions is. That is all he manages to get out before Slor swoops in from above, flying directly into his face and up out of harm's way. Dive, attack, glide upwards and back again, swooping in for the kill. This guy's face will never be the same. Just as he is about to grab my beautiful bird, to viciously end his life, I leap into the fray and enter it fighting. My feet, as good as new, connect with his head, face, mouth, and teeth. My finely honed ears hear a few of them ricocheting off the walls several yards away. My hands, balled into fast flying fists, make contact with every pliable part of his anatomy. I whisper a spell that sends all 13 of the nails from my ears into his eyes. Another incantation turns the braided knots on my head into deadly steel points, weapons to reckon with. All 23 of these find his stomach when I ram into him with my head, sending him flying backwards into a set of garbage cans. Slor is in full force. He brought the magic. When my feet touch ground again, they feel much lighter. Slor is warning me to evacuate the area. Although the attack was swift and silent, the sound of his body slamming into the trash bins was anything but. At any given moment, seedlings may arrive on the scene. I know from experience that this can be a very trying thing to deal with, and I am not up to it. Still, I do not heed my familiar. Not that he hasn't been right before. Indeed, I believe his spirit may have once inhabited a prophet of sorts. His veiled warnings are usually on target, uncannily so. I arm myself with a spell that makes my saliva more poisonous than the venom of the African black mamba, one of the most malignant snakes known to man. The incantation is in a little-known tribal dialect. The heir who taught it to me was an honorary member of their society. Cautiously, I approach the still form. I am awed. He has healed almost completely, save his eyes. I imagine that the tissue cannot reform itself around so many obstacles. His shirt remains torn, and through it I can see as his skin continues to close over the wounds. At any moment, he will be perfectly conscious. He groans, and I decide to take advantage of the situation by getting a few answers myself. I never was one to let a sleeping dog lie. Placing the sharp point of my heeled boot squarely on his chest, I lean over him, unsure of whether he can even see me. Wakey, wakey, I mutter sadistically. I have allowed my voice to take on a low, husky quality. Slor, realizing that he is not going to convince me to change my mind, alights on my shoulder. I speak again to my attacker. You are not as tough as you think you are, I inform him acidly. I certainly made short work of you. He doesn't like my attitude. As he opens his mouth to let out a cry of frustration, I gasp inwardly. He has 2 sets of sharp, cruel fangs. Inevitable words escape my lips as I voluntarily take a step backwards. Son of Satan. Yes, he is rather vexed. I no longer have a hold over him, and he gets up, wasting no time in attacking me anew. Now that I know he is a vampire, his lightning moves make perfect sense, and I face the reality with a sense of dread. I cannot beat him in hand-to-hand combat. I can hold him off from killing me, but not for long. I doubt very seriously that he will spare my life now. From rumors and readings, I know that he and those like him are typically egocentric and cannot stand humiliation. Leave it to me to strike a nerve. Rearing back, I spit fully into his face, aiming for his eyes. As the venom drips into the exposed wound, his screams are potent with excruciation. But to my dismay, the pain has the opposite effect of that which I intended. He immediately increases both the speed and the ferocity of his attacks. I am whispering every protective spell I know to assist me, as I ward off blow after blow. I am on the defensive now, desperately attempting to save myself, in awe that he can be so deadly when he cannot even see. Although his eyes are useless, his senses are astute, innately keener than my own. He even manages to dodge my projectiles of venom, leaving me unable to hit him in the eyes again. Striking from the left and right, he brings his foot up and around at impossible angles and nearly ticks off my head. Strength and agility are things that come naturally to every vampire. They are true predators and need these traits for their survival. I, on the other hand, am a spellcaster. Without my familiar, I am bound by rules that vampires constantly seem to break, and they multiply much faster than heirs. We produce as seedlings do, though the gestation period is slightly longer to allow time for the gifts to be passed. It can happen only through heredity. In order to keep the power strong, we must worry about preserving the purity of bloodlines. What I require now is a psychic net or shield of some kind, a method for keeping myself out of harm's way long enough to demand some answers. This is a spell that will require raw materials, since I do not have enough power left to me to bring forth what I need from the ether. I cannot afford to take my eyes from him for even a nanosecond to look around, and luckily, I don't have to. Slor, my magnificent companion, has picked up on my thought pattern and risen from my shoulder to find something suitable for me. I, meanwhile, am struggling to recall the words to the spell I need. When Slor returns, I am tiring, and the vampire shows no sign of stopping any time this millennium. I am glad to see my familiar, but still cannot remember the words to the spell. Finally, I realize I am at the point where one more well-placed blow will break me. I can stand no more. Creating a substitute spell on the spot, I recite, "Web of troubles, mine at last, weave your spell and hold him fast. Bind him well and let him see that he shall pay if he fucks with me." The spell is crude, but I am tired and need more sleep than I am likely to get in the next 48 hours. The webbing in Slor's beak stretches and leaps onto the vampire's form, rendering him immobile. It appears to be part of a screen door. The spell was successful in temporarily multiplying the screen's strength 100-fold. Had I tried for a lesser strength, I might not have exhausted myself so completely. Unless they are imbued with an abundance of power, Lilith's heirs require raw materials for all spells, and the power to create them comes from within. We are born with this power and have to be careful what kinds of spells we create and when, lest we drain ourselves from the effort. This is why familiars are used, so that the enchantress does not use up all of her own magic. It will take a week to regain full strength, I think woefully. Yet I do not regret my actions. No weaker spell would have sufficed. Already the fiend strains against his bonds in anger, gnashing his teeth and snarling at me. I feel like collapsing onto the ground for a long winter's nap, but I dare not. I have no idea how long my makeshift spell will last, since I have never cast a binding spell on another supernatural being. All I know is that I want to be long gone when it does expire. "You witch!" he screamed, trying to free himself from his bonds. It is hopeless, even for someone of his particular capabilities. "Not quite an accurate description," I replied dryly, "though thank you for noticing. But first things first, I need to see your eyes." I manually remove each nail from the flesh of his irises, leaving the pupils for last. The bloody pits they leave behind heal quickly. His eyes are green. Window to the soul, they say. Suddenly I am as intrigued by what lies beneath his rough exterior as I was afraid only moments earlier. He is a beauty, this one. His cocoa-colored hair curls slightly over his forehead, and his chest fairly ripples with muscles. His features are Anglo-Saxon, and he was no doubt an unassuming white boy before some nasty beastie got hold of him and changed his life for eternity. I'm not entirely sure how the procedure works, but if hearsay and speculation can be believed, it takes more than a simple bite to the neck. I do know one thing for certain. I want him. Badly. A noise from Slor reminds me to stop ogling my enemy and get on with the task at hand. Discomfited, I straighten up and manage to pull myself together to address my captive. "And now," I say, after clearing my throat, "I have some questions for you." He regards me sullenly, and his pouty look merely increases my desire for him. I have bedded many in my 9 decades on this earth, but certainly never a vampire. I know many heirs, several in my own coven, in fact, who don't believe in vampires at all. Just wait till they hear of this night. "Who sent you to tail me?" I demand. He does not respond at first, still struggling in vain to escape his bonds. I'm not willing to be patient. You might as well answer, or I'll whip up something even worse. Tell me who sent you. Now. My superiors, he replied shortly, his teeth gritted in frustration. I didn't realize that fangs could be gritted. But at least he is cooperating. At least for now. How many of you are there? I cannot quote exact numbers for you, he admits sullenly. Be satisfied with the knowledge that we are many. How many? I press. Hundreds. I swallow. This news is not good. If we are outnumbered, there may be a clash. I've heard legends of such things, Lilith's seed and Lucifer's battling it out for control of the streets and inhuman gang wars. I admit frankly that I never paid them any more attention than the average seedling would pay to one of their own myths. It is like meeting my very own Loch Ness Monster. I have lived in San Francisco almost half my life, and I am stunned by the knowledge that vampires walk among us. Have you been following anyone else in my coven? You and the one you call Azrael are my assignment. Your friends are left to others. Then this news gives me pause. You've been following Azrael? The vampire nods, his eyes narrowing in awareness. He knows he struck a nerve. How long have you had this assignment? 6 months. I draw in an excited breath, momentarily forgetting the danger of keeping him bound, forgetting everything except that I have potentially found an answer to the riddle of Azrael's whereabouts for the last 6 months. So you know where Azrael has been. I couldn't find her anywhere. I haven't seen her in person since, well, in a long time. Too long. You must tell me where she has been, what she's been doing. Has she been well? I'm babbling, I know, and much of me recoils from whatever elements of me allow this break in my usual veneer. As usual, I'll tend to forget myself when it comes to anything concerning Azrael. The vampire shifts as if the question unnerves him and grinds his teeth again, something I could have done without seeing. I have been unable to complete my assignment in regards to the witch Azrael. I thought you said you were following her. I said I was assigned to her. I couldn't find her. Disappointment slumps my shoulders. So you've only been following me. He refuses to vouchsafe a reply, instead devoting his energies to straining against his bonds. His struggles remind me of how little time I have to question him, and with reluctance I pull myself out of my last memories of Azrael, and once again force myself to focus on the vampire. How much have you seen of me, of my life? Not much, he grouses. You lead an extremely sedate lifestyle for a witch. What were you expecting? Nightly ritual sacrifices? Did you want to watch me lure children into my gingerbread house? I sneer, contempt layered upon every word. How I detest ignorant stereotypes born of seedling lore. However long ago this thing left their pathetic population, he apparently has not forgotten everything from his seedling years. I was told to watch for anything that might be of use to us. Of use? I repeat incredulously. I don't know that any aspect of my life would prove useful to a vampire. Do you and your so-called superiors require a spell of some sort? If so, I am hardly the right witch to ask. As soon as the words are out of my mouth, I want to snatch them from the air and force them back in. Admitting my lack of ability to this thing hardly seems wise, especially as, unless my eyes deceive me, he is making progress in his quest to free himself. Why didn't you just ask me for whatever information you sought? We were given strict orders to keep at a distance until tonight. What changed? Sokora's death set the alarm bells ringing. They didn't tell me all the details. My instructions simply were to get answers from you, one way or another. I shake my head and cluck my tongue. Looks as though you failed miserably at that. To my surprise, he isn't angry, just amused. He grins wolfishly, and I can see that both sets of fangs are gone. He appears, for all practical purposes, to be a normal young man. The dead giveaway is his aura, which seems to fairly writhe with the life force he exudes. I was warned about you, he admits. I guess I should have listened. Perhaps, I reply vaguely. My thoughts are miles away. After a moment, the vampire clears his throat and asks very politely if I will let him go. My smile to him is laced with regret. I am afraid I cannot do that, I reply. We are still alone, but I have no idea when seedlings might arrive. I shall leave him to God and get as far from him as possible. After all, I may never see you again, I say sweetly, and I want to remember you just like this. The vampire grins at me again. How he can manage to look so simultaneously charming and deadly, I have no idea. Oh, I wouldn't worry too much about that, Zenith. We will meet again. Soon. I step back and raise my face to the sky. The sun is dawning. The new day is approaching from the east. In all my years on God's earth, I have yet to see anyone duplicate the exact colors of the rising sun. It is a combination that is unique only to the hand of God, and I shall never tire of looking upon it, no matter how many mornings I am able to usher in. Yes, I whisper, I'm sure we will. Now I am off and running against the breaking day, shoving past the early rising seedlings, smelling the bay and the fish coming to shore not so far away. Behind me I hear the rampant flap of wings as Soar struggles to keep up. I have left my stalker behind, but his voice, roughened by the winds of time, haunts me as I flee. Sooner than you can possibly imagine.